Next up, our next keynote, the power of SaaS transformation, embracing the cloud and 5G revolution. Delighted to say my guest is Mark Bunn, SVP SaaS Business Operations, Nokia Cloud and Network Services at Nokia. Hi Mark, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Very, very well, thank you. It's been flying by so far today. We've had some great feedback. Lovely to hear from so many people. And you have a lot to get through, so the virtual floor is yours, sir.
Okay, I appreciate it. For the sake of the audience, I'll introduce myself, Mark Bunn, as was stated, Senior Vice President, SaaS Business Operations, focusing on SaaS transformation. But today I'm going to talk to you about really the transformation that's going on in the communications industry around the network. Saw some of the videos before, and I thought it was a really nice segue into how the network evolution is going to help produce more engaged fans. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today. But first, let's start with our opportunity. It's not a secret in this industry. 4G and 5G were really big deals, right? But if you look at what happened as a result of the investments that the network operators made in 4G and really what has happened to date 5G is the value, the extraordinary value that we'd expect from those investments really coming from different sources. It's the ones that were monetizing these big investments that we made in 4G and now in 5G were not the network operators themselves. They were the over-the-top players, ones who created applications who rode along top of that evolved network and created value. And so if there's an underlying theme of my talk today, it's going to be about value creation, and specifically how the network operators, the ones that are defining this next generation network, or how they need to derive the value and what they need to do or steps they need to take in order to get there. But I'll start with a few data points because I think it's really important to set the context. One, and these are by different analyst estimations. If you read various reports, you'll get different numbers, but they're all in the same order of magnitude. We've seen mobile growth over the last a few years up to 7x, and I'm expecting that to continue. By some reports, we're going to see a 3.5x growth in the number of mobile connections, and that's not just by humans. That's going to be the combination of humans and machines. At some point, we're expecting machines to actually have more mobile connections than humans. And also, extraordinarily, what's happening is this network that we've always thought of really as a centralized thing is distributing. And so by some analyst reports, the data that's being captured and processed is happening closer to the point of consumption. About half of that data is being managed at the point close to the user themselves. Simultaneously, there's this growing demand in the industry for more applications to be built on top of the evolving network. And so developers are, in all industries, are becoming involved, and what we're seeing is this exponential growth in API consumption. So that factors in the way we think. We need to be thinking about how do we create value. And then finally, if we're conscious of ESG initiatives, there's still a big digital divide when it comes to modern communications technology. Still, almost half of the world's population is unserved or underserved by contemporary communication solutions. So some of these are challenges, but they represent for us an opportunity to create value. And so what's going to happen as we move into 5G and then beyond 5G is networks are going to become more complex, and that creates a myriad of opportunities, challenges that become our opportunities. But we're going to see more players for sure. There's going to be a growing ecosystem. I've already mentioned applications that are built on top of the network. That is only going to continue. The standards are going to continue to evolve and become more sophisticated. There are going to be there's going to be a distribution of the network elements, as I've already said, out to the edge. More data is going to be processed at the edge. And so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to introduce hyperautomation in order to manage that complexity. We're going to have to take into account data that is distributed and what that implies when it comes to with regard to key topics such as security and latency. And then we also have to pay attention to all this digitalization that's going on, the expectation that increasingly we're removing manual procedures, replacing them with automation, using new technologies or evolving technologies like artificial intelligence. And you'll see some of that represented in my talk here shortly. So this journey to this future network that I'm talking about, what are the essential ingredients? Well, I have them on the right, but before I go there, let me just highlight what I think we need to see as an outcome. First and foremost, we have to see networks that sense, that think, and that they enact. And by the way, this technology exists today. What we don't have today is really a congealing of all of these capabilities that I'm going to talk about into one unified capability, but that's going to happen. And so what we're going to see are networks that are going to move in this direction of being able to sense, think, and act. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here shortly, but just to give you a highlight, sensing is really the ability to capture data, meaningful data in your network. Thinking is being able to add some context to that data, and then acting is executing on that data, taking some action as a result of the conclusions that has been drawn, and doing that in an autonomous way. In order to do this, we have to have dynamic deployment models. Today, frequently we see networks that are take months to build, and we have to change that paradigm. We have to get from network deployments that are measured in months, even if weeks is too long, and get it down to days, if not hours. And then ultimately what we're driving to is autonomy in the network, not completely autonomous, not devoid of human interaction, but with intelligence built in such that humans can configure and the network can continue to keep the intent of that configuration, all done elastically, so that the network would expand and contract based on the demand. Okay, so what I'm going to touch on are 5 areas that are really important, 5 essential ingredients in order to make this happen. One, smart network operations. One is analytics and insights. The next one is security in an automated fashion. I'm going to get back to that point of value creation, and then I'm going to emphasize that this all has to be accelerated through an as-a-service model, especially as the network has become increasingly software-based. So first, smart network operations. I mentioned intent. So certainly as part of the network of the future, it has to be intent-based. The management and orchestration has to be based on the intent of the one who's configuring the network, right? And so if you haven't heard of this term or it's somewhat foreign to you, it's really simple. I define the outcome I want, and then the software, the network itself, maintains that state throughout its life cycle until I change it again. And so it's not devoid of human interaction, but it does imply that there's intelligence that's built into the network in order to maintain that state. It's absolutely essential for us to be able to drive the network of the future. Now, that intent and managing to that intent is only as good as the underlying data that the network has about its configuration. And what we've seen in the industry over the past several years is this proliferation of various inventory systems, resource inventories, network inventories, service inventories, and that's okay. The problem is it's very difficult to get a one good view of what your network looks like. And if we don't have that, it makes it very difficult for our software to manage the state of the network and keep it intact based on the intent that we've applied, the intelligence that we've configured into the system. And so it is essential that we have unified inventory systems, even if it's technically or infeasible or cost prohibitive to bring all those inventories together, it is important that we have at least a federated view of what a master of the inventory looks like for our network, for our resources, and for our service. And then finally, we have in our operations capability has to have some seamless integration with assurance, basically service assurance for closed loop automation. And the point here is that the entire operation is a closed loop. It's fed the intent. And then as trouble arises, let's say that there's an unexpected spike in network traffic, that the network can respond in an elastic way to provide more resources and also to be able to improve any kind of or reduce any kind of anomalies that are being detected. Okay, so smart network operations is one of the elements or the components, the essential ingredients of the network of the future. What is closely related are analytics and insights, right? So with analytics and insights, this is the layer that pays attention to everything that's going on inside of this complex network. So observability is key. And as I mentioned before, when I was defining networks that sense, think, and act, observability is the sensing function, is the function by which the network can detect what is going on, whether the network is healthy, if there is some problem or an element is reaching an unhealthy state, that is detected immediately by observability, automated observability tools that can then turn those into meaningful insights. Right? So the next stage of action would require the network itself to take the data that is learned, the anomaly, if we use that as an example, and turn it into some kind of actual outcome based on AI algorithms that have been trained into the model. Ultimately, what we're intending to do is integrate this analytics and insight function into the network operations so that when we detect an issue, a challenge, that we can resolve the problem automatically, at least make someone aware, but ideally, the ideal state would be to resolve the issue in an automated way. Security. So this, as I've mentioned, the network becomes more complex, it becomes more distributed, and that inherently creates security issues or concerns, at least increases the attack vectors and attack threats, and the attack surface that's on the network. And so this is something we have to pay very close attention to. The network of the future, really the network over the last 10 years has been moving increasingly from a hardware-based appliance to a software-based element that can be run anywhere on any commercial off-the-shelf hardware. But that also means that we have to take into account all of the areas, all of the places where that software can be distributed and make sure that's covered with security, the right security measures. It's not enough really for us to make sure that the software itself is secure, although that is absolutely essential. But we have to use automation like CI/CD tools that have the automated testing built in. We have to use automated pen testing for distributed systems once they're put into production. We have to have the right access control and firewalls in place. In short, what we have to do is create a multi-layered defense in depth security strategy in order to secure this highly distributed and increasingly complex network. We would never, I think we need to acknowledge, we never get to the place where a network is 100% secure. However, what we can do is we can take the right mitigating steps, which would also involve adding automation software for detecting threats and removing those threats as soon as they're encountered. And then also we have to take into account that as security becomes increasingly important for really all industries, but especially for communications, there's a growing skill gap. So what we have to do is we have to offset that skill gap with automated security assurance solutions, some of which we offer even at Nokia. And then finally, value creation as one of the key pillars. As I mentioned before, if there's an underlying theme to this talk, it's about value, creating value. What we need to be able to do is to capitalize on the growing demand of developers to build applications on top of the network, almost treat the network as a platform or a platform as a service, and make it programmable such that applications can be built that would enable things like immersive experiences or highly educated drone technology. Now, this is all predicated on the ability to open up networks that have historically been closed through APIs, and using those APIs to monetize the network through a variety of different commercial models. At a minimum, what we need to be able to do is create an environment in which we enable agile experimentation. There is really no killer use case today that has been identified for 5G, but what we can say is that as the network becomes smarter, it becomes a means by which we can find those killer use cases that can be monetized. And then ultimately, we need to deliver this network as SaaS, and we need to accelerate it, accelerate the deployment, as I said before, from historically what's measured in months to something that can be measured in hours, and we do have the technology to do that today. What that means is it creates this environment in which the idea of the network anywhere or the network everywhere is possible, especially as the cloud providers continue to build out these edge solutions, these cloud edge solutions that sit closer to the point of consumption. And then one key benefit of using cloud and as a service technology is it helps to boost our ESG goals with efficient deployment and efficient and optimized deployments. And in fact, we've been experimenting at Nokia with some of this. We have cloud and SaaS services that we're offering today as commercial services. One good example that really ticks all the boxes is our Ava Energy Savings, our analytics and visualization tool that enables our it integrates with the networks of 5G networks and 4G networks, and enables the networks to be managed in a really efficient way to turn the elements on and off based on the demand. What happens in typical networks is they're usually over-provisioned in order to accommodate peak load. Not very efficient, certainly doesn't help with our ESG goals. What we do with this application integrated to the network is we manage those peak loads such that we can keep all of the elements working when they need to be, and then we can dial down the network up to a certain quality of service threshold when they don't need to be working. And so that optimizes the network, fits our ESG goals, and also is provided in an as-a-service model, so it can be highly elastic, creating this the dynamic that I've been talking about. And so when we think about the network of the future, really, as I've mentioned, this technology exists today. What we don't have is a congealed, aggregated package that brings us all together in a highly unified way. But we're working on that at Nokia, and I know some of other companies are working on this as well. But this is absolutely what we need, because the environment in which we're working is becoming much more complex. The demands are growing. The use cases are going to be much more real time. And so there's going to be an expectation that we can deploy our network dynamically, quickly, in an elastic way, that the network is going to be able to sense and think and take actions based on the observability data that it collects, that will be able to open up the network, create an openness that will allow for our network operators to promote new value creation and create a win-win opportunity for applications developers as well as the network operators. ultimately what we're trying to do is simplify the complexity. So we have to simplify the complex nature of this distributed network that we're going to face. And then in so doing this, we should always keep in mind our sustainability objectives, but that indeed is the expectation that we would be able to achieve that if we're able to also achieve these other objectives. So with those comments, that ends my talk, saving a few minutes for questions in case there are some from the audience.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. That you got through a tremendous amount there in a short time. If I was wearing a hat, I would take it off to you. I have a few questions really, and it's some of the things that you touched on to a degree about how SaaS transformation reshapes traditional business models. But let's try and break this down to a degree. In the era of cloud and 5G, what benefits do you feel it really does bring to organizations?
Yeah. The software as a service it's a proven model. It's a proven technical model, and it's also a proven commercial model in many industries. And even in the communications industry, it is now well adopted in what I would refer to as the IT layer. And so this is not a technology that needs to prove itself. Where we haven't applied it, though, is close to the network or within the network itself, but the technology does exist. And the result is going to be a couple of things. One, speed and agility. We have proof points that we can deploy networks very quickly and we can update them in place, which is something that's quite different from the experience that we have today. And so we need to apply the technology in order to get that advantage. And then another is, look, while we're trying to create this value by opening up the network through APIs, we also need to continue to pay attention to the total cost of ownership. And SaaS has many different studies out there that suggest and even recommend using it as a way to optimize costs, right? Once you take into account all of the costs associated with running your own data center, manage your own operations team, SaaS has a bit of an advantage when it comes to those typical on-premise deployments.
And when it comes to any kind of digital transition or transformation, there's always going to be challenges. But when it comes to the SaaS-based approach, what for you is the key challenge that people need to address?
There are a few that come up frequently, but I think that the biggest one for me is control. Because what cloud and SaaS imply is that there's a transfer of control from the company that is using the software to the company that is providing the software. Now, I think that's completely appropriate. I'm not sure why anyone would want to manage software that they didn't write themselves. It's just it's a very tricky proposition. But that is one of the biggest challenges, how you invoke that kind of change in control with the confidence that it's not going to disrupt your operations such that you can't do business. And so this is a proven model. I have ways that I can help companies to overcome. And I think really one of the things I like to highlight is if one does choose to move into a SaaS and cloud model, what you're really doing is you're asking to change the point of control. You're trying to change it from a technical orientation at the operations level to more of a business orientation where the business users get the control over the intent of what the network is and using the network as a means to an end to drive new business for their companies. So that's really the advantage that I see. But it takes a paradigm shift in order for companies to go through that.
And finally, Mark, to have a man of your experience here and not ask for a bit of advice on behalf of some of our audience, it would be very remiss of me. If you were giving some advice to someone who was wanting to integrate SaaS solutions into their operations, one key bit of advice you'd give them to take away, what would that be?
Yeah, the advice I'd give it even if we weren't talking about software as a service. I would just say incrementalism is a friend. The way that we've addressed it at Nokia, addressed this transformation SaaS at Nokia, is that we don't look to do big bang major overhauls, removals and replacements of mission critical systems. No, instead, what we do is take some of those components that I was referring to, smart network operations, the analytics and insights, apply those into your network, integrate those, they're as standalone packages as SaaS, then it creates a hybrid model. And better yet, start with some greenfield environments where you can then become more comfortable, or use those to become more comfortable with this new paradigm. But it is necessary, and I encourage all of the listeners to take this talk to heart. It's something that we all have to do together, because the network's going to evolve, it's going to become more complex, and we all just have to get more agile.
And as you say there, I think the line we'll all take from that is incrementalism is your friend. I guess that's a slightly more technical way of the old adage about how you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. Your way sounded far more technical than mine. Excellent. Mark, thank you so much for your time. Really, really enjoyed your company today. Thanks for your advice and your insight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy.
Absolutely. Thanks ever so much indeed.